The shell screams past your head at 820 meters per second. You're crouched in a concrete pit, hands shaking as you spin the fuse setter. Above you, Allied bombers darken the sky like storm clouds. Around you, steel fragments rain down from your own gun's bursts. Only 1 in 5 flak crew members survived World War II. You're about to discover why death had such an appetite for these gun crews, and how a weapon designed to punch holes in bombers became the most feared tank killer on any battlefield. This is the story of the German 88, a gun so effective it rewrote the rules of both air defense and armored warfare. But every technical marvel came with a human cost that would haunt a generation. In the early 1930s, Germany watched the skies with growing unease. The Great War had introduced military aviation, but by this decade, bombers were evolving into something far more menacing. New strategic bombers could climb beyond the reach of machine guns and small-caliber fire while carrying enough explosives to level entire city blocks. German engineers at Krupp received a challenging brief: create a high-velocity cannon capable of reaching aircraft at unprecedented altitudes. Through countless trials and modifications, they produced what would become known as the 8.8-centimeter Flak 18. The term flak comes from Flugabwehrkanone, literally aircraft defense cannon. But this weapon would soon prove it could defend against far more than just aircraft. Here's what made this gun revolutionary. It wasn't just about raw power, though it had plenty. The 88 weighed 7 tons on its distinctive cruciform mount, which could unfold in minutes to provide rock-solid stability. A well-trained crew of 10 could deploy it rapidly, and its traverse and elevation systems allowed it to track fast-moving targets anywhere in the sky or on the ground. The ammunition was equally ingenious. High-explosive shells fitted with precision time fuses that detonated at preset altitudes, showering aircraft with deadly steel fragments. You didn't need a direct hit. A near miss could shred engines, hydraulics, or crew compartments with equal effectiveness. But here's the detail that would change everything. That long barrel and high muzzle velocity that made it so effective against aircraft also gave it a flat trajectory and devastating accuracy against ground targets. The Germans didn't initially realize they'd created the ultimate dual-purpose weapon. Let me ask you this: if you were designing an anti-aircraft gun in the 1930s, what single feature would accidentally make it terrifying against tanks? The answer lies in those performance characteristics that seemed perfect for reaching high-flying bombers. The 88 wasn't just a cannon, it was the centerpiece of a sophisticated network. The real innovation was the Kommandogerät, a mechanical analog computer that would make modern engineers pause in respect. This device, coupled with stereoscopic rangefinders and later radar systems like the Würzburg, could automatically calculate firing solutions and distribute them to entire gun batteries. Picture this process. A central command crew tracks incoming bombers, measuring their range, speed, altitude, and course. The mechanical computer processes these variables along with wind speed, air density, and ballistic data. It then predicts exactly where that bomber will be in the future and calculates the precise elevation, azimuth, and fuse timing needed to put exploding shells in that empty piece of sky. The Flak 37 model introduced electrical data transmission, allowing multiple guns to receive identical firing solutions simultaneously. When the command came, entire batteries could fire coordinated salvos at a predicted interception point. The bombers would arrive to find that empty air filled with precisely timed explosions. Consider the mathematics involved. Shells sometimes needed over 20 seconds to reach their target altitude. During that time, a bomber traveling at 400 kilometers per hour covers more than 2 kilometers. The gunners had to hit a moving target they couldn't directly see, accounting for gravity, air resistance, and wind, all while under attack themselves. This mechanical precision gave German flak batteries their notorious early war effectiveness. But as we'll see, the same accuracy that devastated bomber formations would soon carve through tank armor with equal ruthlessness. The gun that learned to kill in 3 dimensions was about to master a 4th, time itself. American forces later captured these fire control systems and marveled at their sophistication. Some components wouldn't look out of place in early electronic computers. The Germans had essentially created an analog targeting computer years before digital systems emerged. Before the World War truly began, the 88 received its combat education in Spain. German crews deployed with the Condor Legion gained invaluable experience against Republican aircraft. But they also discovered something unexpected. Their anti-aircraft gun excelled at destroying ground targets. The cruciform mount that provided stability for high-angle fire worked equally well at low elevation. Crews found themselves using the weapon against fortifications, strongpoints, and vehicles with devastating effect. Spain became a laboratory for tactics that would soon terrorize Europe. By September 1939, Germany possessed roughly 2,600 flak guns, twice Britain's number, and vastly more than America's almost non-existent inventory. German planners had correctly anticipated the need for such weapons, and they would eventually produce over 21,000 units of various 88mm versions throughout the war. But their crews would pay an increasingly steep price for manning such effective weapons. Early refinements quickly appeared. The Flak 36 introduced multi-section barrels for easier replacement when worn out. The new Lafette 36 carriage improved deployment speed, while steel shields provided crews some protection against shrapnel and small arms fire. Longer barrels and improved propellant charges pushed muzzle velocities even higher. Each improvement made the gun more effective and more valuable to destroy. France, May 21, 1940. British armor counterattacks near Arras, attempting to strike the flanks of the German advance. The scene that unfolds here will rewrite tactical doctrine forever. German 37mm anti-tank guns, derisively called door knockers by their own crews, ping harmlessly off British Matilda tanks. The thick armored vehicles keep advancing, crushing infantry positions and threatening to roll up the entire German flank. In desperation, field commanders order their 88mm flak guns to lower their barrels and engage the tanks directly. Crews who had spent months drilling against aircraft suddenly find themselves face-to-face with steel monsters at ground level. The effect is immediate and shocking. At typical ground combat ranges, the 88's high velocity and precision optics allow crews to place shots exactly where they'll do the most damage. Turret rings, lower hull plates, track assemblies. British tanks that had shrugged off dedicated anti-tank weapons suddenly stop cold, burning or abandoned. The Arras counterattack stalls. More importantly, a legend is born. But Arras was just the prologue. The real proving ground would be North Africa's open desert, where Erwin Rommel would demonstrate the 88's true potential against armor. During one engagement, British tanks advancing against his positions were stopped cold by concealed 88's firing at maximum range. The combination of high velocity, flat trajectory, and excellent German optics proved devastating in the clear desert air. Heinrich Hoffmann, a gunner with the 88th Flak Regiment, later recalled, "We could see the British tanks long before they could effectively return fire. Our first shot usually hit. Their first shot, if they managed one, usually missed." The psychological impact was equally important. Allied tank crews began to fear the distinctive crack of the 88's high-velocity rounds, often called the sound of death for its unique acoustic signature that arrived almost simultaneously with the projectile. As the war expanded, ammunition technology evolved with it. Specialized armor-piercing rounds like the Panzergranate 39 and 40 gave the 88 the ability to penetrate 100 millimeters of armor at 2 kilometers, more than enough to threaten any Allied tank of the period. The gun's effectiveness led to its mounting on vehicles, creating some of the war's most feared tank killers. The Tiger I tank carried the KOK-36, essentially a tank-mounted 88. Tank destroyers like the Nashorn and Elephant used the even more powerful PaK-43 L-71, a longer-barreled version that could engage targets at ranges where return fire was impossible. Consider this: many Allied tank crews reported being destroyed by enemies they never saw. The 88's combination of range, accuracy, and stopping power allowed German crews to engage from positions that were tactically invulnerable. But mounting the gun on vehicles came from a harsh lesson learned by towed gun crews. Sergeant Wilhelm Müller of a German anti-tank unit wrote home in 1942, "The Ivans target us first now. They know what the long gun can do. We must move fast, shoot faster, and pray the infantry keeps the ground clear." The vulnerability of flak crews was becoming apparent to everyone, including Allied commanders, who began systematically targeting them. By 1943, the strategic bombing offensive had reached full intensity. American daylight raids joined British night attacks, creating a continuous 24-hour threat to German cities and industries. Flak crews found themselves in a deadly routine. Constant alerts, minimal sleep, and the knowledge that every raid brought them closer to becoming casualties themselves. The technical challenge was immense. Bomber formations grew larger and better organized. Box formations spread defensive fire across multiple targets. Electronic jamming appeared, filling radar screens with false returns. Chaff, long strips of metallized material, created clouds of false radar contacts that broke tracking locks. Martha Goebbels, a young woman serving with a Berlin Flak Battery's range-finding team, kept a diary throughout 1943. "The Americans come in the day like clockwork. We barely finish cleaning the guns from the night raid before the sirens sound again. My hands shake now even when they're not on the controls." Flak effectiveness declined dramatically as the war progressed. Early in the conflict, German batteries might down a bomber with several thousand heavy shells. By late 1944, that figure had climbed to an estimated 16,000 shells per confirmed kill. The Allies' response was brutally direct. If you couldn't eliminate the guns through technical means, you killed the crews operating them. Enter flak suppression, coordinated attacks specifically targeting anti-aircraft positions. Fighter bombers would streak ahead of bombing formations, attacking suspected gun sites with machine guns, rockets, and fragmentation bombs. These attacks were ruthlessly effective against the necessarily exposed gun positions. Quick pause here. Imagine you're a 17-year-old loader on an 88 crew in late 1943. The morning raid has just ended. You're exhausted, your ears are ringing, and there's shrapnel damage to repair on your gun shield. Then someone shouts, "Jabos, fighter bombers." You have perhaps 30 seconds before 50 caliber rounds start tearing through your position. This was daily reality for hundreds of thousands of young Germans. What was it actually like to serve on a flak crew? Former Luftwaffe auxiliary Hans Becker described it years later. "You lived in a constant state of controlled panic. Alert, load, aim, fire, duck, reload. The world became very small, just your gun, your crew, and the next shell to load. The work never stopped. Between raids, crews maintained equipment, moved ammunition, practiced drills, and tried to catch brief moments of sleep. When alarms sounded, everything collapsed to a few critical actions performed under extreme stress. The hearing damage was universal and immediate. The concussion from repeated firing could cause nosebleeds and headaches. Veteran crew members could identify aircraft types by sound alone, but only because their damaged hearing had become hypersensitive to certain frequencies. Food was whatever could be heated between alerts. Sleep came in 30-minute fragments. Letters home spoke of cold hands on steel in winter, of nearby buildings collapsing from near misses, of friends who didn't make it through the previous night's raid. By 1944, crew composition had changed dramatically. Veteran NCOs still anchored the guns, but manpower shortages forced the use of increasingly young auxiliaries, some as young as 15, along with women in support roles, and older men called back from civilian work. Helga Zimmermann served on a Hamburg Flak Towers plotting team. "The boys came to us so young. We older girls, I was 19, had to teach them not just the technical work, but how to function when the building shook from our own guns firing above." Training time compressed as personnel needs grew urgent, mistakes increased. In high-stress situations, undertrained crews made errors that cost lives, both their own and their targets. As bombing intensified, German cities constructed some of the war's most impressive defensive structures, flak towers. These massive concrete fortresses rose in Berlin, Hamburg, and Vienna, paired complexes where a gun tower worked with a separate command and control structure. Each gun tower featured walls up to 3 meters thick, capable of withstanding direct hits from 500-kilogram bombs. Inside were multiple floors containing ammunition storage, medical facilities, supply rooms, and shelter space for thousands of civilians. The towers mounted the heaviest anti-aircraft weapons Germany produced. Twin 12.8-centimeter guns backed by 88s and rapid-firing smaller weapons for low-level threats. These positions could put out devastating volumes of fire, but they represented a strategic dead end. Otto Brenner served on Berlin's Zoo Tower throughout 1944. "We felt invincible up there. The concrete was so thick that bomb hits just shook dust from the ceiling. But we also knew we were trapped. If the city fell, we'd be fighting to the end." The tower's firepower was impressive, but they couldn't be everywhere. Allied bombers could route around them or attack from directions the guns couldn't cover effectively. As impressive as they were, the towers represented static defense in an increasingly mobile war. More importantly, they became symbols of a desperate defense. By 1945, tower crews knew they were manning what might be their final positions. Now we come to the central question. Why did approximately 4 out of 5 Flak crew members not survive the war? The mathematics are brutally simple when you examine the realities of their situation. First, location. 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 Heavy flak guns were positioned around the highest value targets: aircraft factories, oil refineries, rail junctions, submarine pens. When bombers aimed at these facilities, they were aiming directly at the gun positions defending them. Second, tactical priority. By 1943, Allied forces had identified flak suppression as critical to bombing success. Fighter bombers routinely attacked gun positions ahead of main bomber streams. Specialized fragmentation bombs were developed specifically to kill exposed gun crews. Third, exposure and exhaustion. Most gun positions offered minimal protection, often just sandbags or hastily dug earthworks. Crews worked in the open, handling heavy ammunition under fire. Alert cycles ran around the clock. Exhausted people make fatal mistakes. Fourth, the collapse of training systems. As casualties mounted and experienced personnel were lost, replacement crews arrived with increasingly inadequate preparation. Veterans who knew how to survive were replaced by teenagers learning on the job during combat. Kurt Hoffmann, who served with a Munich flak battery, calculated that his unit's original crew of 60 men had been completely replaced 3 times by war's end. We kept the gun numbers, but the faces changed every few months. The final factor was the war's end itself. As Allied ground forces overran flak positions, crews often fought as infantry in desperate last stands. Guns designed for air defense became anti-tank weapons in street fighting, a role that exposed crews to direct small arms fire and close-range combat they weren't trained for. Consider this personal account from Berlin, April 1945. 16-year-old Klaus Weber wrote in his final letter home, "The Russians are 2 blocks away. We've turned our 88 toward the street. Herr Muller says we'll fire until the ammunition runs out, then use our rifles. I wish I was back home helping father with the farm." Klaus didn't survive the war. Neither did an estimated 80% of his fellow flak crew members across Germany. The 88's influence extended far beyond World War II. It proved that a single weapon system could dominate multiple battlefield roles if designed with sufficient versatility and precision. Modern military forces learned crucial lessons about survivability, mobility, and the importance of networked fire control systems. The gun also demonstrated the human cost of static defense in an era of total war. No matter how effective a weapon system, crews operating in fixed positions against adaptable enemies face inevitable attrition. But perhaps most importantly, the 88 story reminds us that behind every technical specification and tactical innovation were real people with names, families, and dreams that ended in gun pits across occupied Europe. when you watch archival footage of black flak bursts dotting the sky around Allied bombers. Remember the young hands that set those fuse timers. When you read about Tiger tanks dominating battlefields, think about the crews who served the guns that made those victories possible. The German 88 was arguably the most effective artillery piece of World War II. It changed how military forces think about air defense, anti-tank warfare, and integrated fire control. But its most lasting legacy might be the reminder that technological superiority means nothing without the human beings brave enough or desperate enough to operate it under fire. Every war produces weapons that define an era. The 88 defined an entire generation's understanding of what it meant to serve the guns when the sky was falling. Their story deserves to be remembered, not as propaganda for any cause, but as testimony to the human cost of the machines we build to fight our wars. If this story moved you as much as it did us, please hit that like button so more people can discover these incredible tales, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more incredible stories of human courage and sacrifice in the face of impossible odds.